Hello, welcome back to another video where we discuss the things going on at Perspective Data Science. Again, Perspective Data Science is a firm that's specialized in AI, higher ed benchmarking, machine learning, econometrics. So the topics we cover in this channel range from AI to higher ed finance issues to Python coding to hardware. We've built some AI computers and things like that. So there's a lot of cool topics that we're going to talk about. In the last video, I talked about our effort to develop an AI that extracts data from audited financial statements for private colleges and universities. Really exciting project, but to stay in the same sort of theme, this video would be about our other effort to extract data from IRS Form 990, informational returns that private colleges have to submit to the IRS. There's a lot of rich data in that in Form 990, so I want to discuss some of those key variables and show you how we use them in our benchmarking applications. So give you a little bit of a taste of how that works and how you might integrate it into your own institutional research, or work with us or contract with us to get this data and use it in your own tools, or we can work together and you can use our tools. So here's the overview of this discussion. I'll give you a quick rundown of what the IRS Form 990 looks like. And highlight some of the key variables that are unique, that you can't get anywhere else. You can't get in the audit. You can't get in IPEDs. And so I'd like to supplement our benchmarking work with these unique variables. I'll show you so we have a Python script. Again, I'm not going to go deep into the coding, but if you want to see the coding, let me know in the comments. We have a Python script that pulls all this data out of the 990s and puts it into a database. So I'll show you what that database looks like for the contractors section of the 990. And then I'll show you how we sort of bring that data to life in our web applications, in our dashboards that sort of benchmark contractor usage for private colleges, and in particular also the food service contract. And show how we use that. Also show you how we benchmark endowment growth and returns, which are also we're extracting from 990s. So excited to show you a little bit about our dashboards. All right, so I'll show you the example dashboard, show you how we use that, and then just a note: this data will be available for purchase for a subscription. I'll probably set this up so that it will be a striped sort of checkout thing, but for now, just email me if you're interested in this data, and we can work out an agreement to share it. So that's an option if you're institutional research or board member or administrator wanting to know more about, get better control in your finances of your institution, know how you compare to sort of the average university or college similar to you. This is a really valuable resource. Okay, so let's get into first item of business. What does a Form 990 look like? All right, so here's one example. This is the 2020 990 for Mills College, which used to be independent. Now it's part of Northeastern University. I think it's called Mills College at Northeastern University at the moment, but this was before they had merged. This is when they were still independent in fiscal year 2020. So what's on this 990 that's unique? There's a lot here. So some of it overlaps with what's in IPEDs, but let me show you some of the things that are quite unique on this sheet. First, you have your standard sort of revenue expenses. A lot of this overlaps with IPEDs, and I don't actually use much of this because it's not very unique. But if you scroll down quite a bit, actually, I think the first thing that's unique that we use quite a bit on our benchmarking is, yes, the section B, I'm not sure, part 7, section B, independent contractors. All right. We use, let's see this. I thought I had this set up to mark here. Let me see if I can do it one more time. Yes, so Independent contractors. This section is quite valuable. It lists a number of things. I'll start actually down here with this number 26. This is the number of contractors, independent contractors that Mills Colleges had paid at least $100,000 in fiscal year 2020. So they had 26, and so that's a big part of what we benchmark, right? If you want to get a sense of if your contractor usage is sort of too high or too low, a good way to to get a sense of that right out of the gate is how many contractors do you have, right? So one way to look at that, and what we have available here, is how many contractors are they paying at least $100,000? All right, then on top of that, the 990s require that each school list out their top 5 contractors, who they are, so their name and business address. So we have all of this data, which I'll show you a little bit. What they do, so a big part of the contractor mix at most private colleges and universities are food service vendors. And I have this massive data set, and I just checked it. 30%, so we have all of the private colleges and universities in the country, all their 990 data that's available from like early 2000s. And so we have a massive data set of like 20-some thousand rows. Of those 20,000 rows, 30% have a food service vendor in the top 5. So it's a pretty common thing for a college to have a food service vendor, and it's common also for it to be in the top 5 of their vendor expenses. So here it is for Mills College, number 1 expense actually for their vendor, and it's $3.6 million. All right, without a benchmarking analysis, you have no idea whether this is high or low, or if that is a reasonable spend on a food service vendor or not. And I'll show you that how we use our benchmarking analysis to get a sense of whether that is reasonable or not. But they have some others too. So they have an online school vendor called Noodle Partners. And again, you can see how much they're paying each of these vendors. All right, so we extract this data and use it in our benchmarking, and I'll show you how we do that later. So that's one unique part of the 990s. Another unique part, let's see. We also have, it's not interesting in this case, but we do have fundraising data. And so there's a couple of interesting things I like to extract from this. One is, what's the gross income from these fundraising events? And so what are they getting actually from fundraising events? You can see it's blank in the case of Mills. So that's interesting in itself that they don't have fundraising events marked here. So it could be that they just didn't mark it, or they didn't do events. So it'd be interesting to ask those questions, right? That's the whole point of benchmarking, right? Find numbers that look odd for your school type. I guess I would expect a school like Mills to have fundraising events. So really simple question, right? If you're a board member or work in institutional research, why don't we have fundraising event revenue here? Is it just that we're not reporting it, or do we not have these events? At least not on the scale that we should. Important questions to ask, right? Okay, so that's one. There's a bunch of interesting stuff in the statement of functional expenses that I have not found anywhere else. I don't see them in audits, and certainly not in iPads. And some of these expenses are quite interesting. For example, spending on advertising and promotion. Simple question, is our school investing in advertising and promotion at a level that's reasonable for our school type? Only way really to answer that is to compare it to what other similar schools are spending. And so Mills is spending $200,000 here. Again, can't say by just looking at this whether that's high or low, but if you compare it to peers, you can get a sense of whether they're in the ballpark or not. Other information here, are they spending a lot or little on IT? Interesting thing to pull into benchmarking analysis. Also, there's like non-employee, there's other sort of contracted services like legal costs, accounting costs, if they have professional fundraisers sort of outside of the advancement office, those would be included in here as well. Travel spending and insurance spending. I've never seen this anywhere else either. I believe I haven't seen this on audits, although it may be in the notes somewhere. I typically don't see that broken out as a separate category in the audits. So there's a lot of opportunity here to take a look at sort of really disaggregated, unique functional expenses and compare it to peers, just pulling this data out of 990s. All right. Let's see, what else? A lot of this stuff is from the balance sheet is going to overlap with what's in the audit, so and also in iPad, so not super valuable there. It's going to be redundant to what we already have in other resources. Another thing that is unique about the 990s is it breaks out a little bit of the payroll data, only for like the top officers, directors, trustees. Trustees typically aren't paid, of course, but you'll typically have a section in the 990 that will have the compensation for the president, and that's here. Total compensation for the president at Mills. There'll also be several other executives included, and a lot of times also like football coaches, other top tier like revenue generating athletics coaches, basketball, and so on. So in this case, we have, we have the a secretary, sort of executive vice president here. We have the CFO, we have the VP of Enrollment and Marketing, Institutional Advancement VP, and so you have the provost. A lot of the top executives at the university, their compensation will be listed here. What, again, just looking at these numbers, I have no idea whether these are high or low. But, if you're a board member, it's really your responsibility to make sure they figure out if they are high or low, right? And the only way to do that, again, is to compare these, what's the similar compensation package for a similar university for that role. And again, you do that through benchmarking. All right, 990 offers that opportunity to do that. All right, I think that was it for the unique variables that I pull from these 990s. So I hope you see the value. There's dozens of very unique, valuable data points here that you can only get, as far as I know, from this data source. So we use it. All right, so let me show you the agenda. So I showed you a lot of the key variables here from the 990, what it looks like. Let me show you what my database looks like. I'm actually just going to pull up PyCharm here. And let's see, make it so you guys can see it better. All right, so this is PyCharm. This is what I use to run my Python code. Probably not the best way to show this data set, but this is what we're going with. So I have this script. This is one of the scripts that pulls all the data out of the 990s. It's called contracts.py. And what it does is basically, iterate through all of the 990s, and there's like 300 lines of code here, and it pulls out the contractor information, that little section I showed you that had, I'll go back up and show you again, just to refresh your memory. Move you guys over again. This contractor part of the 990. So I have one script that just does, that sort of specializes in each part of the 990. So the script you're looking at right now, that 300 line Python code, is focused on extracting the data from this. So really this 26 value here, the number of contractors over 200K. Oops, you can't see it. Number of contractors over 200K, and all of these lines here, the top 5 contractors, what they're called, what they do, and how much they're paid. All right, so back to the script. So the script runs and does all of this, and I'll show you what it pulls out here. It pulls out a data set in the end that is pulling out lots of information. So we have sort of the directory information for all of the schools in the data, which is their institution name. Unit ID is the identifier from iPads. So this data set is able to merge in with iPads, right? We also have an identifier called EIN, which is assigned by the IRS. their state and fiscal year. And then all of this to the right here is from the 990. So let me give you an interesting one. Here's Colby College, for example. And you can see for fiscal year 2021, they have 36 contractors that they've paid over 100K. They had 35 the previous year, 38 the previous year, and so on. So that's Colby College. And then here are the top 5 contractors. So I set it up so it's in wide format. Here I'm going to move it over so you can kind of see it. So we have contract 0 through contract 4. So we have 5 contracts starting with indexing at 0. So the name of the contractor, the amount of the contracts, and the description. So those are the columns of the table. And we do that for each of the 3 top 5 contractors. So we've got, again, name of the contractor, the amount, and the description, and so on. So here's their food service contract. Actually, Bon Appetit, really popular food service vendor. So you got Sodexo, Aramark, and Bon Appetit are the top that I've seen in the list so far, but I haven't really analyzed the vendors in that much detail. But that's another thing I plan on doing. So we have Bon Appetit, that's their food service vendor. It's the description, and the contract is was that $8 million about, and so on. So then I have some work that I did outside of the 990s to sort of pull out, just isolate the food service vendor. So who's the vendor? So you have Sodexo for some of these, and we have the contract amount, and you can see the vendor. So we have that for all of these schools. We have a data set here that's massive. Let me just show you the information about it. It has 21,000 rows, okay? And each row is a college fiscal year combination, all right? So we have, I don't know if you saw in the data set, but we have several years for each college. We have from 2010 through 2022 for some colleges here. So the data does lag a little bit, just like iPads does. Unfortunately, the IRS has been really slow to release 990 data in recent years, but hoping they fix that so we can get up to, we should be able to get 2023 quite soon and be a bit ahead of iPads on the data release. So there you go. That's what the data looks like. Okay. So a little bit of a summary stat. You can see what I was talking about earlier. We have all these contractors here. Let me move this over a little bit. So we have 21,315 rows for this contractor data set. And some of them don't have any vendors, right? So a decent number don't. And so there's 15,000 that have contractors that they pay over 100K. And so that's why this is a bit smaller, 15,000. And then of the 15,000, about half have a food vendor in the top 5, about 7,234. So really common, about half of the sort of schools that have big vendors, about half of those have food service vendors in that top 5. So we have good data on the food service contractors. We also have lots of other, so maintenance will show up in there quite a bit. Construction vendors will show up there quite a bit. We also have, if there's big consulting contracts, BCG, other big consulting firms will show up in there a lot. Huron, EAB, those vendors will show up in there and you'll see those contracts. You saw Noodle Partners on Mills College. Okay, so let me show you how we use this data a little bit. I'm not going to show you all of it, of course. We don't have time for that. This video is already 20 minutes long, but I'll show you a little bit how we do this with the Mills College benchmark dashboard that we made quite a while ago now. It's quite old. Our newer dashboards look a little fancier, but the functionality is all there. So let me pull this up. If we go to Actually, I think it was Mills. Yeah. Perspective Data Science, mills.com. All right. This is the Mills College benchmark dashboard. This is what it looks like. It's just a web application. This is actually the main product that we develop here at Perspective Data Science. It's really all about higher ed benchmarking, finance, benchmark all sorts of things, not just finance, number of contractors, enrollment, pipeline. We have a simulator that actually predicts future enrollments based on current parameters. So you can't really see here, but there's a lot of parameters here into that determine your future enrollment, right? So it's trickier than people realize, right? You make a change today to your, say, marketing strategy. You're not going to see the full effects of that change for at least 4 years, right? Typically with a 4-year sort of enrollment cycle. So the new steady state is a little bit tricky to get a handle on. And that's what the simulator is about, right? To predict, okay, if we make a change today and we hold everything fixed, what are we likely to see the next 4 or 5 years for enrollment? And that's what this simulator is all about. Interesting things, since we're on the topic, I'll just show you one of the issues that was at Mills College was that their number of applicants cratered, right? So you can see it's kind of hovered around here towards the end of its life, but whereas earlier in its life, applications were, far higher. 2015, 2014, there were like double the amount of applications they had towards the end of its life. And that was really unfortunate. Is one of the reasons the school had big trouble. So yeah, interesting that you can do this in the simulator and see, you can change parameters and see how things are going to change in the future. Anyway, I don't know why I got onto that, but let me bring you back to the 990 topic. All right, so I was going to show you the contractor page. Okay, so this is the contractors page. We have the variables I was talking about, number of contractors paid over 100K. We have it presented in multiple views. One is a bar graph, one is a time trend, so you can see a snapshot in time, what you look like compared to your peers. Also, you can see over time compared to your peers. And you can see Mills is always quite a bit higher than the peer set for the number of contractors. But it's not really sophisticated. The more sophisticated analysis comes in this bottom view, which is a regression analysis, really basic regression analysis that looks at, on the horizontal axis, the number of full-time equivalent students. So on the horizontal axis, we have the size of the school. Let's try to zoom this out so you guys can see it better. The size of the school, and then the vertical axis is whatever variable you want. In this case, we have number of independent contractors paid over $100,000. And then we have a slider here that you can select different years and kind of track this for multiple data points. But an interesting thing happens here when I back this out. Mills College are the red dots. So you can see they sort of start out here, which is pretty normal, right? So ideally, and they had like 1,600 students here, and their number of contractors was about average, right? Average for your size would be the regression line, right? I don't want to get into a big sophisticated discussion of regression analysis, econometrics, but basically what a regression line does is try to fit this data as closely as possible. And in doing so, it estimates the average number of contractors in this case, given the size of the school. So for the size of Mills College in, I believe, let me double check this. This year was 2014. They're pretty close. They had 17 contractors for their size, and that's about right. The regression line says they'd average is about 15. So right about right. All right, but notice what happens over time. Mills College kind of moves like this. So there's a couple of things that are interesting about this move, and the final data point before they merged was this one. So there's a couple of things to notice here. When they're merging, they're moving left, right? Moving left means that the school is getting smaller, right? We're moving left on the horizontal axis. All right, so the school shrinks quite a bit. And while the school is shrinking, instead of moving sort of down this average line, right, and getting fewer contractors, which would be normal, actually significantly increase the number of contractors that they had on their sort of, not payroll, but on the expense as part of their expense. So that is interesting in itself. And one of the things that sort of drew my attention was this big gap that ended up towards the end of Mills's life. They had a lot higher number of contractors than would be expected, right? So just to give you the actual numbers here, 11, they expected to have for their size of 1,000 students or so, about 11 contractors, and they actually had 26. All right, and just to show you that point again, this is if I just select 2020. They had 26 contractors, as I showed you on the 990, and the average when you just select 2020 expected value is 14. So they're almost double what you would expect for a number of contractors. All right, so I know it's not perfect science, right? But it begs the question, right? Like a school struggling financially probably shouldn't have more than normal number of contractors, right? And you probably wouldn't want to have less than normal, right? Both are quite inefficient, probably. But there's a lot of things to dig into there, like why do we have so many contractors? Where are they? Are these contractors normal or not, right? Can we do without them? Questions like that start popping up. All right, so that's one way we use that contractor data. Another way is to actually look at the food service contract. And there's a similar thing that happens here. If I back up, I back this up again, and you guys can see, again, we have the same thing happening. Mills's food service contract, let's go back to, so from 2015 to 2020 is what you're looking at here. And their food service contract in 2015, oops, did the wrong thing. These food service contracts look, they're a little high, but not super alarming, right? Again, you're comparing the distance between the current contract and the expected value, which is the regression line. And again, what happens here is the school is shrinking, but a shocking thing happens is that the food service contract itself gets more expensive as the school shrinks, quite a bit more expensive, actually. And so that's another question. Why is it so expensive? And it's far more expensive than normal. Just to give you the idea, they was paying $3.6 million for their food service contract in 2020. I don't have 2021 on here, but 2020, $3.6 million. A school of 1,000 students, average contract would be about $2 million. So that's $1.6 million higher than normal there. All right, so again, questions to ask. A really simple thing to do, which I would have suggested if I was working with Mills, is, go get new estimates, right? Check. This was with Bon Appetit, right? Try to get a new estimate with Aramark or Sodexo and see if they come in at sort of this average regression line number of 2.1 million rather than 3.6 million. All right. Or use this data right here to just leverage a better contract with Sodexo. And say, hey, why are all my peers paying so much less than I am, right? Or maybe it's the contract that you sign with them. Maybe you think about, what's the priority of the school? Do we want to balance the budget, or do we want to make sure that we have all these food options all over campus or something like that? But questions to ask, right? That's, again, the benefit of benchmarking is to find anomalies and start asking questions, right? Sometimes it's perfectly reasonable to have numbers that look weird. But you don't know that until you really start asking these questions, right? So really important to ask them and to have benchmarking to sort of guide you onto what are the questions we should be asking. Excuse me, I've been fighting a cold for like 3 weeks now. Okay, that's one way we use the 990 data. I'll just show you another one. Another one is we use the 990 data to track closely the endowment and comparing it to peers. Mills had a really big endowment for its size, $188 million compared to the peer institution of almost half that, 120 million or so. But one thing we look at in particular here is the slope of this, or the growth rate. This looks normal, but sometimes we have schools where you can't really see it. I'm sorry. sometimes I'm looking at this graph right here. This is Mills College endowment versus the peer set. Sometimes we have situations where the school we're analyzing, their endowment is pretty flat here compared to peer institutions. And then so there's a question of whether, why is that the case? There's a lot of things that can affect the endowment growth. One is the rate of return. So we can check that from the 990 data. And you can see that's actually one of the things that I flagged looking at Mills's data. They have a number of years here where their investment return net of fees is quite a bit lower than peers on average. So every year you see this return was 12.7%, which is great, but the peer institution mean was higher, but that turned out to be just one school. Make sure we get this to be fair here. There we go. I have missing data, so I restrict these so that they're always the same schools. Yeah, so here's another example. So they lost 3.2% in 2016. And the average peer of 32 other peer institutions was a loss of 1.7, doing poorly here in 2018, 19, and 2020. So one reason an endowment can grow more slowly or shrink compared to peers is that the returns are not as good. Another way could be that the spending is just higher than normal. And you can get that actually off of the 990s. I think I forgot to show you the endowment data actually on the 990s, but you can see the endowment payout percent or endowment. I'll show you again on the 990s. You can see the amount they're pulling out of the endowment to support operations and anything else. And Mills had a higher than normal spending policy. In fact, quite a bit higher in 2020 when things were really getting desperate, and that would be, pulling back the endowment growth there. So these are things that you can check quite easily with the 990 data. Let me show you that. So I totally did miss the endowment section here. Let me show you. It's quite useful if I can find it. There it is. Endowment funds. Okay, I still have okay. So actually iPads does have endowment data now, but it just started like a few years ago, and it's not nearly as detailed as what you can get off of the 990s. So we pull off of the 990s, we pull all of these values, end of year balance. All right. And so we got the endowment value from this part of the 990. But you can also see other things that are in here. So spending from the endowment is the sum of these two, right? Some of the endowment is used to support scholarships and other spending as part of the spending policy. So you add these up. They're taking $12 million out of the endowment to support operations, and that's part of the spending policy. But there's other inputs into the endowment. So you've got contributions, gifts, and then you also have your return from the market, right? And then you have the administrative expenses. So it's another thing to check here, right? Like, are we paying a lot to our investment managers to manage the endowment? Are they taking a lot higher fees than our normal? And you can do that again with this 990 data and can benchmark the investment fees. All right, so all of this we pull out and to track returns. You can see their return here was 3.7 million. I kind of messed it up, but comparing that to the value of the endowment to get that's the net investment return. So to compare that to the value of the endowment at the beginning of the year to get sort of a percentage return, market return. All right. So that's how we use the 990s, and I hope you see it's useful. Let me go back to my summary here and make sure I hit everything. We use it primarily right now for contractor benchmarking, endowment values, returns. Also look at like debt, goes way back in time with debt compared to iPads and in more detail. But we'll look at all these other unique spending categories, IT expense, insurance, travel spending, all of this can be benchmarked. The investment fees, we're going to do all that. In fact, we do all that, but I'm just not showing you here. Okay, so if you're interested if you work in institutional research, you're a board member, you're an administrator at your university, you want to have a better handle on what you're spending your money on and try to make sure everything is normal, benchmarking is the way to do it. And it's not just iPads that you have to use. You can use audit data, as I showed you in the last video, which we use. Also, 990 data is quite valuable, and I hope you see that from this video. If you're interested in doing a similar analysis using IRS 990 data, reach out to me. My email is mhendricks@perspectivedatascience.com. You can find me through the information on YouTube or however you're getting this video. Happy to work with you on a subscription, and we'll make it worth your while. All right, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.